Welcome to this week's episode of the Brand Blueprint. I'm your host, Dana Ammons, and today we're diving into one of the most important stages of building a brand, product development. Now, whether you're launching your first product or scaling to meet growing demand, understanding the formulation process is essential. Today, I am so excited because we have a very special guest with us to help demystify and break down that process. Her name is Desiree Crenshaw, also known as Desi or the Glam Scientist. And Desi is a seasoned chemist and entrepreneur with years of experience helping indie brands bring their formulations to life. Now, in this episode, we're going to break down the crucial steps you need to take to create a standout product, avoid costly mistakes, and ensure that your product is scalable. And scalable meaning you can produce it on a mass scale, which would hopefully make you mass money. Now, Desi will also shed light on why it's so important to own your formula from the get-go and how you can avoid getting stuck with a contract manufacturer who does not have your best interest in mind. And of course, there are some really great contract manufacturers out there, but there are some bad ones as well. And so we're going to hopefully help you try to avoid some of those mistakes. We'll also explore some of the mistakes that many founders make when they skip over the proper product development process and how you can learn from these mistakes to accelerate your brand's growth. So if you're looking to create a product that's both high quality and scalable, this episode is packed with insights you don't want to miss. Hey, brand builders, ready to take your brand to the next level? I'm Dana Ammons, and welcome to the Brand Blueprint. Welcome back to the Brand Blueprint podcast. I'm your host, Dana Ammons, and joining me today is my fabulous co-host, the incomparable Cataanda James. We are thrilled to welcome an extraordinary guest. Today, we have Desiree Crenshaw, also known as the Glam Scientist. Today, we're excited to have her as she will be adding her expertise to the Brand Blueprint to help you figure out and understand how to navigate the space and the process of developing your product with a third party or outsourcing a lot of the work and formulation to experts like Desi. So with a background in cosmetic science and years of experience working with indie brands, Desiree has established herself as a trusted resource in the industry. She's passionate about empowering founders, especially those from underrepresented communities, just like we are here at the Brand Blueprint, and by demystifying the formulation process and guiding them through the journey of product development. Now, Desiree, we are so excited to have you here today. Thank you for joining us on the Brand Blueprint podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Excited to have you. Now, look, before we jump into the interview, which I'm really excited about, we always jump into a bit of what we call the rapid fire segment, which is our way of getting to know you a little bit better and allowing our audience to get to know you a little bit better on a personal level. And so I am going to pass that on to my fabulous co-host, Cataanda James, and Cataanda will join us and take over on rapid fire. So are you ready to get started?
I'm ready.
All right, let's get started with our rapid fire segment. Okay, Cataanda, you take it over. I'll see you guys soon.
All right. Thank you, Dana. Hey, Desi. How are you?
I'm good.
Thank you for hopping on with us today to share your expertise and insight into product development. I want to kick it off with the rapid fire questions, as Dana noted. So, number one, what's your favorite scientific discovery and why?
Okay, I really don't have one. I know I'm a scientist. I nerd out often, but not that much.
All right, you guys, there you have it. She doesn't really have one. All right, so I think you have one of these. One ingredient you think is overrated in beauty products?
Okay, coconut oil. People love coconut oil. They want to put it on everything, hair, skin, everything. It is not good, and I do not recommend it. Coconut oil. I got one more. Vitamin C. I love vitamin C, but it is not potent for hyperpigmentation, and that's what most people want to use it for. So I think it's overrated in that way. I do love it, but it's overrated.
Yeah. I knew the first one, but I wasn't privy to the second one. So good to know that. Coconut oil. That's so funny. All right. So this one's really easy. Coffee, tea, or energy drinks to keep you going, or water?
So I love coffee, but none of them keep me going. It's just my emotional support drink. I love it. It's
Yeah,
comforting. But if I'm tired, I'm just tired. Nothing's waking me up.
got it. Okay, that's good. I'm not a coffee person either. All right, last one. A fun fact about yourself that most people don't know.
I am a classically trained dancer. So ballet, tap,
Oh,
jazz, modern, all of that. I grew up dancing. I danced until probably until I was about 25. Yeah.
wow.
Yep.
Nice. I love that. I didn't know that either. I think that it explains like your poise. You're so perfectly
Thank
poised.
you.
All right, so that's it, you guys, for our rapid fire questions. We will now bring Dana back and kick off the interview.
Hey, I was listening off stage. That was a really really cool and interesting fact. I got a follow up question though before we jump in. So all of those genres and those styles of dancing, favorite style, given your mastery of all these different styles.
Probably modern. Horton technique.
Wow. And
Yes.
so wait a minute. And so for those untrained, call it non-dance followers, when you say modern, because I think a lot of cats are like, oh, was she crumping or is she doing like the doogie
No.
or like tell her what modern is.
Modern dance, I could best describe it as maybe interpretive ballet or cultural ballet. So it
Mhm.
requires a lot of technique, clean lines and things like that, but it's not stuffy.
I
So when
love
you
that.
think Debbie Allen, that's modern.
One of my
Wow.
favorites. And that's
Yeah.
for those of you young folks watching this show, and I know we got a lot of millennials and Gen Zs who hear Debbie Allen. They're like, who's Debbie Allen? Well, first of all, she's the sister of Felicia Allen Rashad, which you probably know as the former TV wife of Bill Cosby. But what you young folks don't know is that Debbie Allen is a mean, and I say currently because she probably still can cut a rug with the best of them. But when I was growing up, she was on a TV show called Fame, and she was by far one of the most iconic Black female dancers on screen at the time. So if you haven't checked out any Debbie Allen video, go back on YouTube. I'm sure it's out there. There's probably a couple of super reels of some of her stuff, but she was the one back in the day.
I think
All
she
right, well,
actually still does choreography.
I think
Yeah.
so, right? That's why I said I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
she
yeah.
still can cut a rug because I feel like I've seen something recently where she's still out there dancing. So, no, super, super dope fact. And we appreciate the transparency and for sharing a couple of those tidbits with us in the audience. So, are you ready to get started with the main interview?
I am ready.
All right, let's jump into the main interview.
Okay, Desi. Can you tell us what inspired you to start your own company and dedicate your expertise to supporting indie brands?
Yes. Okay. So I always did want to be an entrepreneur. That was the ultimate goal. When I graduated college in 2008, we were in the height of the recession. So although I had an uncle that was a cosmetic vet, he was like a VP and he had worked at all the major companies and everything. We had the same last name at the time. Although I had like inside connections, I could not get a job. Like everybody in the industry was in a hiring freeze. So um, I skipped 5 years of my 10-year plan. You know, I had originally planned to work 5 years, get my feet wet, and then work out on my own. But I'm not one to sit still. So the opportunity was there. I got started with, my marketing and just looking for different ways to put myself out there. And I got my first client. I found them on LinkedIn, or they found me on LinkedIn. So by the time I started getting phone calls for interviews, I already had clients. So I've been on my own and, in this industry ever since.
Awesome. That first client saved you
Absolutely.
because you were about to enter the world, the corporate world, and it was going to be much different for a little bit. So thank
Yeah.
God for those first clients.
Thank God. Yes.
So with that being said, how has your background in chemistry shaped your approach to product development?
Um, so if we think about product development, it's kind of twofold. So there's the product development that is planning the products, determining like how they'll be positioned, what key ingredients we'll use, and things like that. And then there's the formulation side. So a lot of times when people work in product development, they don't really have the lab experience. In my particular situation or in my circumstances, I do have the lab experience. So I'm able to bring like real I know what actually works from my experience, my hands-on experience. So I'm able to bring that into the product development side. So we kind of skip a lot of the guess and check that could kind of come up when you're typically working with, like, let's say a marketing department or a product development department. They're considering everything from like the consumer perspective, what is going to be front facing. They're thinking about the marketing, the positioning, but they don't actually know what's going to work. And I do. So I'm able to bring that expertise into the whole like process, and it kind of cuts out some of the time that it takes to get to like the great
And the
end.
mistakes.
Yeah.
Right. And the mistakes. I think it's a great
The
point, Desi,
mistakes,
because
exactly.
I worked with you in a extended sense of my career as the marketer who didn't know product development, right? And so at companies like SC Johnson, Pepsi, Colgate, P&G, we depended on an entire department, right? A whole wing of the company was devoted to the science of product development, which you would have been a leader in, right? And so for the audience, in bigger companies, Dana and Desi's, the marketing and the product development departments work together, including, to Desi's point, a couple of other departments, market research, consumer insights, to bring all of this information in to shape the overall and final development of said product. You as a small entrepreneur, though, cannot obviously resource all of these different resources, especially not efficiently or effectively from a cash standpoint. So, Desi, talk a little bit about how you currently work with clients in a consultancy capacity, but even prior in your career experience working with small entrepreneurs to bring this type of product development to the table.
Yeah, so we start every project with product development. So we'll have a consultation and we'll dive deep into everything from the key ingredients, competitive benchmarks, price points. I like to look at profit and profit margins first. So we're able to do all of that ahead of even going into the lab. And a lot of times that's when an indie brand doesn't have that kind of support, there's a lot that they skip. And so I'm able to fill in that gap there. And then from there, I'm able to put like a starting formula on paper. It'll guide my work. Some of my clients don't work with me for the formulation part of it. So for them, they're able to take the information that we've gathered together and how we've hashed it all out together. They're able to take that to whoever they're working with. For some,
And
they
have
don't
a formulation done.
Yeah, so then they'll have another expert put together that formulation. Sometimes they're working directly with a contract manufacturer. Sometimes it's just another chemist that they already had a relationship with, but didn't have the same level of expertise that I had.
Correct.
So that's pretty much, the process, how we get through
And
that.
do the clients that you work with normally already have like the key ingredients or the key goals of their product set in stone before they meet with you, or is that something you develop over time with you as you're looking at all of those data points?
Normally they have a vision. So they may not have all of the key ingredients in place. They may not even know what other competitors exist. A lot of times people think that I have this brilliant idea, nobody else has it, and I'm able to find like 5 other products. This one is kind of like yours, and this one is a little bit like yours, So so I'm able to do that, but a lot of times they just come with a vision. They may have like one particular key ingredient they want to include, but my job is to look at what exists, what's doing well, what's not doing well, what customers are saying about what already exists, and then make your product or your brand better. So I'll bring in ingredients that you probably hadn't even considered or didn't know existed. A lot of times they're proprietary ingredients or ingredients that are newly released from, raw material suppliers and things like that. So they typically they have a vision, but they don't have all of the pieces in place. So I'm able to fill in those gaps and make it a highly competitive product.
So, Desi, I have a question. Just because I do work in product development, I am not the formulator, but I am the person that's more on the, forming the key ingredients and the ingredient story and, the deciding things like what textures we want it to be and what we want it to do and calling out benefits and things like that. From an indie brand perspective, what would be the benefit of them working with you on both ends of the formulation and the product development process versus going to you for one or the other and then reaching out to a contract manufacturer for, I guess, like formulation? Because I know some benefits there, but I want you to let our audience and viewers know what that could be and what that looks like.
Yes. Okay. So working with me, everything is custom for the most part, and you own your formulas when you work with me. So when we work together on both product development and formulation, you have the ownership of the IP, and you also know that what was created together is something that you literally had a hand in throughout the journey. So we start with the concept, we hash it out, then you're able to sample the product as we go along. You provide your evaluation, I revise it, and we keep going back and forth that way until you have a product that you really feel good about and you say, like, I really developed this product, I had my hand in it. Whereas when you work with me, you're able to get your product developed, the concept developed, and then the formulation developed, and it's typically custom or semi-custom, and you own your formula when you're done. So you have like free reign of that product, and you own the IP, so you can do whatever you need to do and whatever is best for your brand to build it the way that you want to build it. However, if you work with me just for, let's say, the product development step, and we hash out the concept, and then you take it to a contract manufacturer, most of the time you will not own your formula outright. Even though you've done the development, it's your concept, you won't own it outright. You'll have to negotiate that if you want to. Also, a contract manufacturer is really not going to start from scratch with your product. They'll look at the brief I provided, they'll see the ingredients, and then a lot of times they'll try to negotiate with you. Do you have to have this ingredient, or can we switch out for this one? Because they want to work with what's already stocked as opposed to really giving you a completely
Unique
customized,
product.
formulated product that's going to perform the way you dreamed of it
Yeah.
performing.
Yeah.
Are there benefits to using a contract manufacturer then if you have to kind of negotiate away so many of the personal benefits of your own brand?
Yeah, there are benefits. The biggest benefit being the cost savings. So
Mm.
you won't start out owning your formula, so you're not going to pay as much on the front end for the R&D part. With me, you're owning the formula, so it is a hefty ticket. You consider like how much you expect to make in profit on your formula and kind of take a fraction of that. Whereas contract manufacturers, they're making their money on the units. They want to keep you as a client so that you're constantly placing orders for hundreds, thousands of units, and that's where their profit comes in. So it's cheaper, it's less expensive to get started. It's also a little quicker because they're going to start with the base formula. They're going to put your key ingredients in there, sample it to you, and see how you like it. Whereas I'm starting from scratch. So it's going to be a process. It's going to take time. So there are benefits, but I always say there's a time and a place. So when you're starting out and your budget is limited, it's okay to do private label or contract manufacturing. But when you're thinking about scaling and you really have like this multi-million dollar, potentially billion-dollar concept and brand, then you're going to want to work with somebody like me who's going to allow you to own your intellectual property and really own the whole process of the journey, so that you can capitalize when it's time to either exit or continue as the legacy brand.
Correct.
So you said one option is you starting with you get the whole everything is personalized from the beginning, and the other option is you go to a contract manufacturer and they kind of simplify it down to base materials that they already have. What about our small, like, kitchen made business owners who already have, I don't want to say like they have the whole chemical components down, but they have their formula, their kitchen formula, and maybe they're scaling upwards out of just being a kitchen brand for friends and family to having actual customers and orders, but they already have kind of a formulation. Is that the type of company that would still be able to come to you and be like, we have this formula, we just want to own it, or we just want to perfect it, for example?
Yes. And I do get a lot of clients like this. A lot of times when you start an indie and DIY, you've done it yourself and you have a formula, a lot of times it's good for what you've done, but it's not good enough for where you're going. So I come in and I will tweak it with permission, but I like to tweak it because I still put my product development hat on and say, how can I make this more competitive? How can I make this product even better? Because my vision for you, even if your vision for you is not here, my vision for you is like way far out. So I'm looking that far to see how I can help you in this position. I'm also going to work with you to ensure that when you do take it to the contract manufacturer, they can't push you around. So a lot of times I become the spokesperson for those clients, and I'm going to talk to the contract manufacturers and make sure that they don't kick out ingredients that I know have to be there. And that they don't push you around, because they know when someone's DIY and doesn't know the lingo and doesn't know how things work. And so a lot of times, that happens to indie brands where they don't have what they end up having when they're done working with the contract manufacturer is not what they started with, and it's not aligned with their brand, their customer base, or any of that. So there is a benefit to that. The other thing is, a lot of times when you've DIY'd your formula, it hasn't been tested the way it's supposed to be tested. So I also have to go in and do the stability testing, the preservative effectiveness testing to ensure that the product is safe and it's actually meeting the regulations that it's supposed to. When you're doing it on your own, you don't know what you don't know. What you do know is, when I made this product and I sold it, people loved it. My customers love the product. I hear that a lot. They love the product. I don't want to change the product. And I'm like, well, some things we're going to have to do a little differently just to make sure that you're hitting the marks and you're doing this thing the way you're really supposed to do it. So yeah,
and
that's how.
Desi, keeping that point going, that was a great question, Heloise, because it opened up one of the things I wanted you to comment on, Desi, which is, and you started there, which is the nightmare scenario of going to a contract manufacturer, not speaking the lingo, not having your act together, not understanding your consumer strategy, et cetera, and just letting the contract manufacturer essentially drive the entire process, which results in you ending up with something that you didn't intend when you started. Can you share some good examples or some key areas where founders do make those mistakes when they skip over you as the glam scientist? They don't come to somebody with you like with that expertise. And to your point, because we both have worked with those founders who are so headstrong, they've got this formula. Founders, I hope you're out there listening, especially those of you who are willing to be humble. You don't always have the answers that you think you have just because 15 or 20 folks at your church and in your inner circle in your neighborhood have all told you that the skincare product or this hair care product is a bomb. It doesn't mean that it actually is ready for sale in a commercial setting. Now, if you want to continue to sell it at the farmer's market and out of the back of your car and over the internet, that's fine. You can take that risk, but you can't scale in that scenario. So talk, Desi, a little bit about some of the, maybe not without naming names, but there are some pretty, famous, if you will, or infamous, cases where products have been essentially formulation-wise taken over by a contract manufacturer and resulted in even lawsuits and potential damage or harm to the consumer because the formula wasn't the actual formula that the original founder started off with.
Yeah, I will give an example. It's not a client of mine, but it's a public example, and they've addressed it, so I'll use them as an example. The honey pot is a really good example of this kind of happening. So the story of the honey pot, and the formula came to her from a visit of her ancestors. Her grandmother came to her and she gave her this concept, because of something she had been dealing with in her health privately. So she put together the formula. It worked. Obviously, it helped her. It worked for her. And she was able to build a brand out of it, a really big brand. So, fast forward, the honey pot is in Target. We have like the George Floyd situation happened. And so, we really get spotlighting these Black, brown people.
Target increases their equity efforts with brands. That was for those of you, I was actually in Minneapolis working with P&G, calling on Target at the time that happened. So I know the story to your point well. And honey pot was embraced by Target as a example of when a retailer in their minds at the time really got behind a brand that was built around diversity and reaching out to diverse audiences. And then I'll let you continue the story. But for those of you who don't know it, definitely Google or AI, the honey pot story, so you can get a little bit more in the background on that brand. Shout out to the founder of honey pot as well.
Yes. She's phenomenal.
Yes, she is. Yeah.
So yeah, fast forward, so they're in Target, and of course that, you know, that puts your brand and your product in front of hundreds of thousands more people. And once you have that big spotlight, other things start to come into play. So essentially, there was nothing fundamentally wrong with the product that she had to start with, but there were some things kind of behind the scenes. I'm actually also a honey pot customer, so
Nice.
so I can speak on certain things.
Yep.
There was one thing where I found I would see a lot that people would say the mechanism wasn't working, like their pump wasn't working. Well, I had never experienced that until one time I purchased a bottle and my pump wasn't working. So me being who I am, problem solver, and trying to figure out like what's really going on in this bottle, I take the top off and I look in there. There's actually like little clumps of surfactant that weren't fully dissolved. So it wasn't that the mechanism wasn't working. It was more so that the product wasn't fully
emulsified, essentially.
it wasn't fully emulsified. And so that was what the issue was. So that was at one point. And then you get to the point where, you know, they've really scaled. It's time for them to get like serious about the formula. So they made some changes. Unfortunately, they rolled out the changes without telling the customer that they were rolling out these changes. And so that's where the controversy came in. But what they did essentially was they changed the surfactant system so that they didn't have any solids in the formula anymore at all. It was all liquid surfactants. So now we don't have the pump problem anymore, right? Then they also reinforced their preservative system. So initially, the preservative system wasn't as strong as it really needed to be. So they reinforced that. They made it more robust. And so they improved the product without changing how it functioned, except they weren't able to get ahead of that with the consumer beforehand. So now you have like the drama of they changed the formula. The ingredients don't look the same. They sold out. They're not doing what we want them to do. They're not for us anymore. You have that whole thing that happens. Whereas you could have started at the beginning. My mother always said, if you do it right the first time, you don't have to go back and do it again. And I literally live my life and run my business that way.
We might be cousins. Yeah. My mom used to say something similar.
So had they done that, and this is not to discredit anything that B has done as the founder.
Exactly.
But just as a teachable moment, had they started before they got that big opportunity with Target, before they scaled to that many
homes, right? Yep.
Yes, that many homes.
Yep.
They could have handled those things first. But again, you don't know what you don't know.
And that's why, right, we're giving that advice, because I think it's such a great point, because I find so many founders say, I'll figure that out when I get there, right? So many people right now listen to me saying, I'll figure that out when we get there. When we start, this is a very popular saying in the Black founder community. Hey, when I get the money, I'm gonna do that, right? We all like to say, when I get paid, when I finally start sales, I'm gonna fix that, right? And the problem is there are certain things you need to fix up front. And I think Desi makes a very, very important point that I want founders to really, really keep in mind when they're watching this show. If you don't get formulation right on the front end, you fixing it on the back end will become one of the most expensive, if not crippling, parts of that process. And can Desi, you explain why? Because you were throwing out some terms that I know some people are probably not comfortable with, surfactants, et cetera, but they need to know these terms, right? Preservatives, because they are key parts of commercializing, again, your product. You could do it out of the back of your car and take it to the farmer's market without some of these things included, but you can't scale. So talk about the cost, because I think that's the one piece I want people to understand, is because people will say, well, man, Dana, you told me to go to the Glam Scientist, and I went, and she gave me the cost for the upfront formulation and work. And I was like, whoo, man, I need to go do something else. And then I'm always like, well, guess what it's going to cost you now on the back end to fix that formulation that you went and got off the shelf and didn't test and didn't validate. And now you've got consumer claims out there. Now you got retailers asking you to pick up product and return it at full cost. So talk a little bit about that, Desi, just the cost of not getting formulation right. I think there's some other things, packaging, et cetera, that you can shift and change on the fly if you need to, but formulation specifically.
Yeah, formulation specifically. When you don't get it right up front, you run the risk of recalls that you'll have to do, which I think we've seen a lot in the last few years. We've seen a lot of brands having to do these recalls. And us as a consumer, it looks like, okay, the few products we see as a consumer, we see maybe like 15 bottles on the shelf. You're like, okay, you had to take a few 15 off the shelf and it's fine. No, behind the scenes, this is like 30,000, 50,000, 100,000 bottles that are being warehoused with your whatever your retailer is. And if your formula is off, let's say you start to get situations where you have one customer that says, I broke out. And then you have the TikTok phenomenon because they've gone on TikTok and they're like, I use this product and it broke me out. And the next person, I use this product too and it broke me out too. When did you buy yours? I bought mine here. I bought mine there. And so now you have this big like viral issue that you have to deal with as a founder. Now you have to go and recall your product, take it off the shelf, but you've already spent tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of dollars on that and you can no longer sell it.
Correct.
Fix the problem, and it's going to cost you to fix the problem because you should have did it right the first time.
Yep.
So a consultant is going to come in and fix it. They're going to charge you for that. You're going to have to go through the stability testing and all that stuff all over again. That's going to cost you. Then you're going to have to go back into production and run all of that product again. And it's going to cost you a lot, far more than it's going to cost you to do it right the first time. And like to your point, it is expensive on the front end. So you have to consider that. You want to think about how are you going to fund these things from your savings? Are you going to, position yourself where your credit is where it needs to be so you can get that upfront loan? Are you going to start reaching out to investors or figure out what it's going to take to make your brand look good for an investor to invest in a startup, which is difficult? You have to consider those things so that you put in the upfront work and you can reap the benefits later, as opposed to having to deal with, the potential pitfalls and things that can happen that God forbid that they happen, but it happens and we've seen it. And customers they give you a hard time about it. So even after, you fixed everything and rerun it, the customer now, do they even trust you anymore?
That's right.
Do they still want to, try the product or buy it again after they've had such a negative experience with it? So you're back at square one. That can bankrupt a company.
So Desi, speaking to the ingredient part of it, you're talking about all the stuff that I'm privy to, that I've been a part of, that I've been behind the scenes in. But for the founders out there and also our viewers that may or may not be founders, maybe just consumers, with the ingredients, does it matter where you source your ingredients? Are all ingredients that are seemingly the same or no?
They are not all the same. When you think about, for instance, like carrier oils or vegetable oils, like a avocado oil, aloe, sunflower, depending on how it's sourced, it will determine the quality of it. But when you're thinking about the more key ingredients, the ingredients that a lot of times the bigger brands make a big stink about, those ingredients are more standardized because they're developed by a more reputable raw material supplier. They're created in the lab where they're sourced very specifically and they have like an actual trackable journey from point A to point B. So it is important that you are sourcing your raw materials from reputable sources. You don't really want to be looking at the farmer's market for your oils. You don't really want to go to the local like fragrance shop or the essential oils that you can buy at the health food store. Those aren't the ones that you really want to be using in your products. You want to
Wait,
go.
why not actually? Why not the ones at the health food store or the local ones?
Because there's no tracking of that. Like you really don't know. You don't know the source. You don't know how the source material was grown, under what circumstances, in what positions.
That's a great point.
They don't have the paperwork that's necessary, like certificate of analysis, where they've actually see what are the key components, what exists here and what doesn't. All of that stuff is important. And you don't know how it's been regulated or if the regulations have been followed in that particular instance. A lot of times those products that are sold in the health food store, they are repackaged. They were purchased from another third party supplier. And then, whoever that was, they've created a brand for themselves, but they're really just taking the big bulk, breaking it down into the smaller bottles. And, so you really don't know where that stuff comes from. But if you work directly with cosmetic suppliers that are regulated by the FDA. They do have certain, testing and checkpoints and things that they have to be, ready for. And they also have audits that pop up. They're audited by the EPA. They're audited randomly by the FDA. So there's things that are in place to ensure the safety of those ingredients that you really can't guarantee has happened with the other ones.
That's a great question. Can I follow up that, Cataanda? Because this is really probably for both Cataanda and Desi, and that is, and Heloise and I share this experience in my previous work with Urban Therapy and the brand Twisted Sister. We worked with several contract manufacturers. We picked up or inherited, frankly, a situation where the product portfolio was a hodgepodge of contract manufacturer outputs of the same product. And so in that particular case, you had same SKUs, leave-in conditioner, with the same label, product inside looked completely different from one another because one contract manufacturer made the product, didn't have the same ingredients or was not willing to essentially source the same ingredients that contract manufacturer B sourced. And so now you're ending up with this almost kaleidoscope of product on the shelf because you're sourcing from two different contract manufacturers, two different sets of ingredients. And I know in the last couple of years, there's been an extreme shift in the amount of regulatory compliance and laws in this specific in the beauty category. And really to drive more safety, right? But can you talk a little bit, because I know the laws are extremely complicated and dense, but just in general, kind of some of the recent changes in the cosmetics industry with regard to ingredients and testing of product, et cetera, and how that, how founders should think about that now going forward in terms of their product journeys in the cosmetic and beauty space?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the certain tests were already required by the FDA. A lot of brands ignore them, but they already existed. You had to substantiate your product for safety before it hit the market. But now we also have the introduction of MOCRA, which is a new tighter regulations on cosmetic products by the FDA. Typically, or previously, the FDA was more of a reactive kind of organization, so they wouldn't really get in your business unless somebody alerted them that they should get in your business. Now they're getting in your business up front, and they've gotten to the point where they're getting a little closer to the regulations that you see in like the EU and UK. So they want you to make the claims that you need to make about your ingredients or report them to them and have it on record so that they're able to handle and see, what's going on. It's more public to the consumer and things like that. So it has gotten to be more stringent. We're still not as strict as other.
The UK.
Yeah,
correct.
Strict to the UK.
Or Europe.
Or Europe. That they're not allowing at all. So
correct.
That. But it does give, I think, consumers a little bit more comfort with the products, and it does call indie brands and all brands alike into question. It holds them accountable a lot more when you have to go through these steps and you have to
meet regulatory levels and requirements and testing.
You have to do more declarations of things. You're going to be more about your business than you may have been before when the substitute teacher is in the room versus your regular teachers.
That is such a good point. And look, I am always a big proponent of, and I tell a lot of my founders I work with, like, look, I understand the government is over-regulating everything, right? Like that's kind of the theme in the conversation at the moment. Too many laws, too many regulations, government's putting their hand at too many things. However, with regard to cosmetics and beauty products that you put on your skin, on your body, in your body, these are areas of regulation and safety that I do believe in. And I do believe there needs to be tighter regulation. So while I think indie brands initially translated that regulation and that new, the implementation of that regulation is somewhat punitive to indie brands and the smaller brands, which it was, frankly, because of the cost now associated with additional product development and safety regulations, I do believe the intention of these laws and regulations are correct. And the reason I'm so much of a believer now, and Heloise can kind of validate this living in Barcelona herself currently, is that when you go to the UK and you go to Europe as a founder and a brand owner, and you try to take your products across the pond and get distribution in those European markets, you will quickly find that most of your US-based cosmetic brands cannot pass the regulatory laws and requirements in the UK and in Europe to even get distribution. And I got to tell you, as a CEO of a former, beauty and hair company, I was shocked when I realized that we were selling product in the UK and Europe that was fundamentally better, in a sense, than our products in the US, because the UK and Europe were requiring us to ship a product that was free of a lot of these additional chemicals, et cetera, that we still allow in the US. And no more, I think recently in the news, they just announced, we just decided as a country to finally ban red, fake color red 82 or whatever that, particular fake dye or color is that's in a lot of our foods and cosmetics here in the US. And so I say that to say, and I really appreciate, Desi, you breaking that down, because I think, unfortunately, especially for indie brands, in the cosmetic space and the beauty and the skin space specifically, which frankly is one of the few categories on fire right now, while there's a lot of flatlining and declining categories, beauty's still growing, relatively speaking, right, versus other categories. And so everybody wants to get in a share in this kind of honeypot, excuse the pun, of of what's happening in the beauty category, but it's not necessarily going to be as equitable if you don't do the research, don't work with people like Desi up front. And so I really appreciate you sharing that additional insight.
I actually have another question I'm going to jump in. This one's actually for both Cataanda and Desi, which is, speaking of regulations, a lot of news has been made and a lot of things have been said with some of the people we have interviewed recently, some of the experts, about the new regulations on claims for products such as cosmetics and hair care and all of that, and how even the claims and the benefit claims need to be properly researched and properly defined. What would you guys say to small brands or small companies who either had claims that their product wasn't fulfilling, or who want to create a product with a claim, and they come to you like they have this vision, I'm going to create this magical product that does this, and this, and the claim and the vision that they come to you with is not doable? How do you deal with that kind of situation?
I'm gonna grow your edges out.
So I'll jump in there first. From the product tester point of view, not only do you get that with indie founders, but you also get that when you're working a lot of times with the marketers at these companies, even at these larger companies and corporations. The person, the marketer, the founder comes up with this amazing, brilliant idea that's going to totally change the game of hair care, or, the lipstick game, or whatever may have you. When they come to an expert like me, that is a licensed cosmetologist, I have the experience in all hair care, also in cosmetics. From my professional point of view, being behind the chair in this point, it's not achievable. So to your point, Heloise, a lot of these things are not achievable just because it sounds great, but just scientifically, I think people forget the science in beauty.
Or don't know.
There's no beauty. So that's why we have Desi, who's a cosmetic scientist. And a lot of times they just want this amazing brand. They want to be, have this groundbreaking launch that no one else has, and it's just not possibly achievable. However, you come to a Desi, or you come to someone like me that's able to help you tweak, like she's able to help you tweak the formula, help you tweak the brief. I'm able to sort of assess across different skin types, different hair types, not just one or two, to say, hey, this is the things that we need to do to change this. We may not have your end goal, it may not be achievable for that, but we can get somewhere close to that. So as a founder, not testing on your cousins, your aunties, your grandmothers, your friends next door. You have to go to someone like Desi or someone like myself to get the product tested. I'm not a Desi, so I only do performance testing. Mm-hmm. Desi can do all of the claims work and all of that. And that's extremely important, because you cannot claim these things if you don't have the proof behind it. And a lot of indie brands, like Desi was saying earlier, in the past, they haven't been bothered. So they don't bother the little people. They bother the huge giants, the huge beauty giants up here, because they know that these people actually have money to pay for lawsuits. The indie brands, they kind of get away with a lot of things. They get away with, maybe not labeling everything on pack. So they have eliminated or omitted some of the ingredients on pack, but they're actually in there. Or actually they included something that really is not, they barely have any of that in there, and they've listed high up on the list. So Desi can take over, but I'm just here shaking my head and nodding my head like, this is like my passion behind product testing, going to a reputable product developer. I don't have anything against contract manufacturers. However, when you don't own your formulas, that's when you get into situations where you're needing to change your manufacturer. You're needing to reformulate, but you don't want to go with them anymore because maybe they now don't have, I guess, the accessibility to an ingredient that you have included, and you're going somewhere else. And when you go somewhere else, they don't have the formula. They don't have the exact, like, it's like a recipe.
Well, you can't take the formula. Cataanda, let's be clear. I think that's what the audience needs to understand, right? Because we've been saying that repetitively. I want to make sure people understand what we're saying when we say own your formula. When you work with a contract manufacturer, you don't own that formula up front unless, as Desi said, you make arrangements and you negotiate it up front, which means you're going to pay an extra cost, anywhere from $2,000 to $15,000 to $25,000 per formula. You're going to pay, right, for complete formulas, where if you do it with Desi up front, you'll probably get a more economical price per formula, and you own that formula. Meaning, to Cataanda's point, if you go with contract manufacturer A, and for any reason, and let me tell you, with working with contract manufacturers, there will be plenty of reasons down the line that you will potentially come across that you'll say, whoa, I don't want to work with this contract manufacturer anymore. I need to go to contract manufacturer B, right? You get ready to leave and you never negotiated the price for your formula. Well, guess what? Now that you're ready to leave and you don't have ownership of the formula, you think as a contract manufacturer, you're about to cost me business walking out the door, because now I'm not getting the PO that I used to get from you every couple of weeks for 15, 25,000 units. I'm going to charge you now 5X for that formula. That back if you would have negotiated with me on the front end, I probably would have gave it to you for $3,500, $5,000. But now that you want to leave and take your $400,000 worth of POs a month with you, I'm going to probably charge you a couple of $100,000 to walk with that formula. And while you might not think that's fair, you might call it discriminatory, and you might, make all kinds of claims. I got the formula. I own it contractually. You can say all you want. And here's the thing that I think owners don't really understand. Because you don't own the formula, in some cases, the branding, after you walk away and you don't pay my bill and you say, screw me, and you're going to go work with somebody else, I'll take that successful formula. I'll go talk to those customers and those retailers that I already had a relationship with because I was shipping your product. And I'll take those money. I'll take that money, right? So Desi, Cataanda, talk about that, because I think that you just hit the nail on the head, Cataanda. Like, the claim thing is one part of it, right? And I know, Desi, you were about to weigh in there, but if you can tie those two things in, is the claims and being able to make the claims on your product still ties back to that ownership piece. Like, you got to own the formulation to even make the claim. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, not only that, it's like a recipe. You can have this amazing recipe for pound cake. So Desi gives me a recipe for pound cake. She gives me all the ingredients that I need to use. She's not giving me the measurements. I have the recipe without measurements. How am I going to recreate what was already made? So that's the importance of owning the formula, the exact, amount of whatever, exact amount of coconut oil that's within this formula. Because you're going to get the same texture. It's going to look the same. You're going to get the same color. It's going to perform the same because you have the exact measurements. But when you don't own the formula, you just know all the ingredients and you take it to Desi and you're like, okay, this is what we have. And Desi has to, it's sort of like working backwards.
Backward engineering.
Sort of like start over, because Desi now has to figure that all out. She's amazing. I'm sure she'll get it the first time around.
Which you can do. And that's actually a great point, Desi.
Like, it takes a lot of testing, where me working at L'Oreal, I can just say we tested products time and time again. Like, there are so many rounds of testing, and they do actually own their formulas, but to get that right, you have to pretty much have everyone in place, the right people in place. You have to have the formulator, you have to have the labs and chemists, you have to have the tester and the expert, and then you have to have the correct panel of people that you're testing on. Where Desi then comes in, we would do the performance testing prior to the claims testing. because we know it performs amazingly. So now we need to make sure that it passes the claims testings. And then I guess Desi can jump in because I'm not really privy to, I've worked with regulations and things like that, but I don't know exactly how it's done. So Desi can explain that to the founders because those two things are important. And claims testing is a lot more expensive than performance testing.
Yeah. With claims testing, I send that out also. While I'm formulating, I'll do some claims testing just to ensure, let's say, for example, a heat protectant. We got to make sure that if we say this product is going to protect your hair up to 450 degrees, please don't turn your flat iron up to 450 degrees. But if we say that that's what it's going to do, then we have to test that to be able to prove it, you know. So for me in the lab, I'll have my flat iron here. I'll have swatches of hair here, and I will burn the hell out of the hair. I will burn the flat iron all the way up to 450. I will do 10 passes. I'll do 10 passes, 20 passes, and then I'll go wash it and see if it's back. And I'll take pictures of that. So this is what I'm doing in the lab. Just to ensure that the work that I'm delivering to you is going to pass the claims testing. But you have to send it out to a claims testing lab for them to do, because they'll have a methodology that is the same across the board and they'll be able to track everything. Science is all about methods. Science is always all about repeatability. So have to be carried out in a way that's like literally standardized and repeatable and all of that. So all of that has to happen before you can make certain claims about your product.
And Desi and Cataanda, let me also, for founders who don't understand the claim, kind of the point of the claim and why the claim is important. So in general, claims allow you to differentiate your product. Right. So if founders, if you're watching me, you're thinking, well, I don't, what about claims? I don't really care. No, you do. And you probably are currently making the mistake of making claims about your product that you haven't tested. So anything that you're saying your product can do or deliver as a benefit to the consumer is a claim. That claim has to be based on real science. It cannot be based on, hey, my friends all tell me that their hair grows every time they use this product. That's not a validated claim. And I know a lot of founders come to me with these really cool concepts and product ideas, and they have these claims they're making. And I am almost like horrified that they are potentially going out and making these claims in public, because if you cannot validate them, you open yourself up to legal action by the consumer. So keep in mind, claims are not something that you just want to go out there and start pumping up on your social media platform. And hey, y'all, if y'all buy my product, you will definitely get rid of all your blemishes, or you will most certainly see this happen in 5 days. If you don't have a way to validate that claim is going to be subject to legal litigation. And the other thing to note about claims are, which I think some founders get mixed up, claims are not proprietary formulation. That's two different things. So if somebody is making a claim, for instance, that this will, a great example is heat protectant. Heat protectant is not something you can own as a claim. So there's a lot of founders who run out here and go, well, my product is heat protects, and now I see somebody else who says their product is heat protect. I need to sue them. You can't sue them for a claim as long as they've validated that their product can deliver on that same claim. You could have a product with a different set of active ingredients that could still deliver a similar claim. So don't get twisted up on, well, I've got these claims and so-and-so, I seen this other product and they got these claims. They stole my idea. That's not how claims work. So I think that's really important. And last thing, Desi, I want you to put in perspective too, because I think the other thing that I found founders being a little blasé about is owning formulations. And I've heard it said kind of this way, well, I don't really need to worry about it because I've switched contract manufacturers before and they've just been able to back engineer the formula that I couldn't take from contract manufacturer number one. So I just go to my new one and they'll just figure it out. I bring them a couple of old bottles, they do some work and they get it pretty close, Dana. So I'm not worried about that. Desi, why is that a potential problem?
It's a potential problem because number one, it's very hard to do. And so if a contract manufacturer is claiming to have reverse engineered your product and they were able to do it like lickety split, they didn't reverse engineer your product. They put together something that the texture was similar to the texture that the benchmark that you gave them is, and they told you that they got it right. And that's what they're pass it off to you. But the problem with that is now you still don't own the formula with contract manufacturer number 2. So when that relationship goes sour and you're ready to go to the next one, you're starting all over again. So by the time you've gotten through 3, 4, 5 different contract manufacturers, you do not have the same product that you started with, like nowhere near the same product that you started with. It is very difficult to reverse engineer a formula. It takes a lot of trial and error, and I personally do not like to do it. I would rather. A lot of times I'll turn people
Build
away.
it
No,
new.
I'm
Yep.
not going to reverse engineer this product. We can start from scratch
Yep.
and we can make you something better. But reverse engineering is not really worth my time.
Agreed. And that's what I usually advise founders. Don't worry about trying to get to the, because it was likely a formula that the contract manufacturer didn't put, to your point, a lot of research, a lot of effort into anyway. You likely got a formula. Your first couple of formula founders is going to be based on price. Let's just be real. Most of you are going to walk into a contract manufacturer and say, hey, I want to sell a hair conditioner and give me the best price. That's most of the time you're going to go in for the best cost of goods. It's only when you actually start really getting into your product and brand strategy and pricing and everything that makes your brand really come off the shelf will you then start thinking through long term, okay, whoa, maybe I need to own my formulation. Because when you start thinking scale and formulation, you need to own your formula to sell. So a lot of you out here running around talking about, yeah, I got this brand, y'all, in about 5 years, I'm gonna sell it for 50 million and I'm gonna get that big bag. You can't get a big bag if you don't own nothing but the label and the plastic that the product's in. And many of you right now think that you own the brand and you only own the label. And in some cases, you don't even own that. So I want to finish with that point, Desi, which is, I cannot stress enough to our listeners. I am going to, obviously, you guys know who Cataanda is. You can get to her on our platform as well, but both Cataanda and Desi in tandem, you need to put these people in your Rolodex and have them on quick dial, because there are many, many reasons to engage with people with this expertise. But specifically, as we get into this next final step, I want to make sure Cataanda and Desi both really emphasize why having them in the conversation is going to be important for this last step. And that is when you head to production. So let's talk, Desi. You now work with you. I've taken your advice. I've done product development with you, formulation with you. I'm ready to now go and get this thing produced and start shipping product. One, talk to me about specifically how you work with your clients to help them manage that process, et cetera, because there are a lot of potential pitfalls and mistakes you can make there. And then two, just in general, give our audience some advice on if they're out there right now and they're working with a contract manufacturer, about to, take something over to a contract manufacturer and start the production process and POs, et cetera. Can you give us some practical advice on how to work in that environment to, best prevent essentially getting taken advantage of?
Yep. So when working with me, I've actually designed my service so that I'm your main and one and only point of contact. So if we've done product development formulation together, then I'm sending your product to production. And so you won't have to worry about dealing with the manufacturer. You won't have to worry about them, wanting to switch out ingredients that you don't agree with or you don't even know to say no to. You won't have to worry about that because I'll handle it. But let's say, for instance, you're a DIYer or you're someone that works with a contract chemist, but they don't provide that same level of support. They're going to give you your formula and you'll be on your own with dealing with that manufacturer. So want to make sure that you communicate or have a call with the manufacturer to find out what is their minimum order requirement. MOQ is what they'll call it.
Yep.
So a lot of times, and this people get sticker shock about this, but a lot of times that minimum order requirement is
10,000 units. Yep. 10,000 units, really, right? Yeah.
10,000. And I've seen starting at 30,000 units being that minimum order requirement. But there
and for
are
founders, real quick, for those of you not math inclined like me, I'm just going to give you the quick math on that because we're talking units, and the units kind of sound a little doable. I know some of you out there like, I got 30,000, I got the 30,000. Okay, no, we're saying 30,000 units. So take that 30,000 units, multiply it. Let's just give you a low average cost. Your cost is likely not going to be this low for any cosmetic product that you come up with, but for the show's purposes, we'll use our Preserve the Curl product, which we are developing on the show. Our Preserve the Curl product on average cost is going to be about $5. So now multiply your 30,000 units by your $5 cost. That is what you're going to owe the manufacturer at least 50% of. In most cases, they will ask for 50% of that amount up front before the line even starts rolling. So before you even get to product first, you're going to have to put about $150,000 down with call it a off the rack contract manufacturer. Now there are some, and we will feature some later in the season. There are some really good contract manufacturers that work with smaller amounts. And as Desi just was indicating, you can find some 5,000 unit minimum production deals out there. So keep going, Desi. But I want to make sure, because we were saying units, and I know people were listening going, man, I got that 5,000. Dana, what you talk about, bro? I got that. And I'm like, no.
Yeah,
5,000 times 5.
Yeah,
right?
we're talking about six-figure investment into production.
Six-figure investments, people.
Contract manufacturers. So you'll have that. You'll also have you have to understand that there's a difference between lab scale and production scale.
Mm-hmm.
So the equipment that's used to produce or create your samples, like the stuff that I'm using here in my lab, is not the same as the big kettles and machinery that they're using in the production facility. So there is a difference. The way it's processed here versus the way it's processed there, it could lead to issues. So there may be troubleshooting that's necessary in the scale up phase. And so you'll want somebody to be able to help you with that can speak the language, that understands the machinery and things like that. But that's something that you'll have to consider, and you'll have to, if you're an indie founder and you're doing everything on your own, you'll need to start doing some research to figure out, what do I need to know in order for me to best handle working with the manufacturer. You also want to know what their quality control standards are. So how are they testing the product while it's in production? Are they doing a micro count before they release it to you? Are they retaining samples, which is important? Are they retaining samples for a certain period of time, so that in the event that you have a customer complaint, they're able to track
to that batch?
I got here, let's test this sample and see if it has any bacterial growth. Let's see if it has any yeast mold or anything like that. Let's see if it's separated, because your customer is saying that their product is separated. We'll have a sample retained for that. So they're able to validate what they've done and, stand behind their work. So these are things that you'll want to know. And then you'll also want to know the lead time. A lot of times, this is so scary, but
thank you
all the time.
Yes.
Is they'll set a launch date and they won't have any product.
Yes.
We're launching up first. It's like, but you don't even have inventory. What are you launching? And if something is going to go wrong, it's going to go wrong. Manufacturers are notorious for telling you a certain lead time, but they can't cut it.
Desi, hey, let's double type on that point. First, give the audience in general. I mean, because I know it's just from manufacturer to manufacturer, process to process. But let's just say, perfect scenario. I come to you and I don't have a concept at all, and we start working. I want to launch, and let's say right now, for the audience who's watching this will probably drop in about 4 or 5 days. But today specifically is Monday, January 20th. We're celebrating Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. So I want to make sure timing wise, for this example, everybody understands what I'm saying. So we want to launch June 1st of this year. Today's January 20th. Give the audience just a general timeline of, number one, the full timeline to develop, formulate, and then produce. And then let's say I've got a formula. Give me the timeline where we just go into a contract manufacturer and I want to get product out to ship to that January 1st first ship date. Or is it realistic? And then what are the average timelines?
Okay, if you're working with me, you're not getting the product ready to launch in June.
Ah, dang.
From the get-go.
I already missed it.
We're starting from scratch, and you're going to get it's a whole process. So going from working with an independent formulator like myself, you are going to expect a 6 to 9 month experimental
process, right? Yep.
Right.
6 to 9 months, guys.
6 to 9 months, and really 9 to 12 months.
Yep.
Because we have to communicate back and forth. You have to have time to actually test the product over time, not just, I tried it one time and this is my evaluation. No, you need to try it a few times. You need to, it's a lot of things that need to happen. And then you have to give me that feedback. I have to digest the feedback, make the revisions, and then we start the process over again. So that takes time. But additionally, after we've done and you've approved the formula, then we have to test it. So we have to make sure the product is stable. We have to make sure the preservative system is working. That's minimum 3 months. But if something, is to happen where the product is not stable, okay.
Got to go back and reformulate.
go back, reformulate, let's fix the issues, and then we have to
redo
start
stabulation. I love that. Is such a good point, because I've seen so many founders on that process, miscalculation of that timeline alone, lose distribution on a promising opportunity because they overpromised a retailer they could deliver this product on June 1st, and they never even talked to the contract manufacturer before they sold it in. Right? We see it all four of us so often, and it's just something that I hope if you get anything out of this episode, you really, really listen to Desi's advice. Even if you don't contact her immediately, you can't afford it right now, you're not at that stage, reach out and have a conversation. Talk to her for at least a consulting and a sit down. She can give you some great advice and just really direction on what not to do, so that when you're ready to start, you actually are spending your money on something you really need to spend your money on. Because what people don't realize is what I see happening, and where we talk about, and we're not going to besmirch all contract manufacturers, because again, there are some good ones out there in the industry, but there are a lot of bad ones. And I think even contract manufacturers would tell you within their industry, there's a lot of bad players. And so when I say that to say you can go out and spend all this money, just as Desi just called out, you can tens of thousands of dollars, because to her point, the first year of your product development is not going to be a year of sales. So your year one is going to be pure investment. So if anybody out there is looking at a forecast and you got a 4-month in, you already selling $30,000 worth of product a month, man, you better erase that, push that all the way back another 12 months. And so that first 12 months, you're going to invest. Then you'll start to see the result of those sales. And so I definitely, we were so appreciative of you coming on the show. And I want you to just comment on one other thing. As I brought up at the very end there, we are developing a product for fictional purposes on the show called Preserve the Curl. And to your point, Desi, we have been very deliberate about the development of this product, because we want to demonstrate to our audience the steps that it takes to bring a brand from concept to reality. And so as we exit capsule 4 in product development, which we're in right now, can you kind of wrap up this segment by giving some final advice to our audience on, hey, if you're sitting at home and you're at the stage where you're pretty sure you understand the concept of the product you want to launch, you've got and done some consumer insights and research, and you kind of know what the consumer is, and now you're ready to start formulation work, just give our audience some final advice on what they should think about, how they should work it, and then finally how they should reach out to you if that's what they want to do.
If you've gone through those steps, then I think it's time for you now to start looking at, who you want to formulate your product. And when you're doing that research and you're kind of interviewing, I don't like to be interviewed. I'll say that. I don't like to be interviewed as an expert. I do like to answer questions, but I don't like to be interviewed. I like to speak to clients and find out what their vision is. And then based on what their vision is and the feedback that I'm able to provide them, or the conversation that we have back and forth, I want you to know, based on how I communicate with you, that I'm the person for you, or maybe I'm not. A lot of times it's an issue of my prices, procedure, the timing, whatever. But I prefer to just have a conversation and we find out if we mesh.
If there's a match.
If it's a match. But I do find a lot of founders do want to interview. And I should say this. The reason I don't like interviewing is because it's not for a job, it's for a partnership. We're going to be working very closely together. So you have to know if you like me. You have to know if you like whoever the chemist is that you select, because you got to work with them a long time. You got to know if your communication styles match up. You also have to know if they know
it's a real relationship, right? Like they should approach it like you like approaching a relationship, not like you approaching it some sort of job where you're about to retain or hire somebody to do something for you. I agree with that description wholeheartedly. It is a partnership. So audience, leave the interviewing to us at the Brand Blueprint. When you get on the phone with Desi, don't try to pop out these interview questions. Just have a conversation.
And really just don't do it to anybody. There's a way to find out if this person is going to be able to accomplish the goal that you have. And they have to be able to give you pushback if pushback is necessary. To your point, people come to you with products and claims that just cannot be made. So it's a red flag to me if I've spoken to somebody and they told me, well, the other chemist I talked to told me they could do
so they could do it. If you want magic, you go back to chemist David Copperfield, right? Yeah, right. Like if you want magic, I don't do magic. I'm a chemist, not a magician.
Yeah, certain things that we have to, parameters we have to stay within. So,
Mhm.
a little
Yeah.
check.
And speaking on choosing who you're working with and all the steps that go into choosing your manufacturer and and all of this, one thing that Dana said earlier stuck out to me, and one thing that you said as well, which is you become the only point of contact. And once the manufacturer has the formula, the formulation, they're the ones shipping it to the stores, right? The
Mhm.
owner of the brand doesn't necessarily get those bottles back, do like the final check
Correct.
before they go out to the store. So
Correct.
in that case, is the manufacturer, and I'm asking this because I'm on the design side, I'm on the visual, on the production side, the packaging, is does the manufacturer also deal with the designs and the packaging? And are you choosing a manufacturer also based on the quality of their designs and manufacturing and packaging? Or can you choose another company afterwards to handle that? How does that work? Both when they're working with you or when they're going to a third party?
Overall, I recommend that founders get their packaging sourced elsewhere. So,
Mhm.
source your bottles, your labels, package design, all of that. I recommend that you have that done and then you send it to the manufacturer for them to fulfill
Mhm.
or bottle it. I don't recommend working directly with a manufacturer for all points of the process
Mhm.
because their packaging is usually stock and it's very limited. Their design, like a lot of them will have like a designer in-house, but you'll find that using their in-house designer, your product is going to look like everybody else's product. It's going to become very obvious that you went to the same manufacturer that brand X went to. So in order to I don't recommend having custom packaging starting out. But in order to have that custom look, I recommend working directly with a designer of your choice. I do have some strategic partners that I'll recommend, but nobody is required to work with the people that I work with as a client of mine.
Mhm.
Again, you own your stuff, so you have full reign. I'm just here to and add the assistance. But anyway, I recommend that you work with a designer directly. We will have some correspondence because I want to make sure what goes on your label and on your packaging is within regulation. A lot of brands get this wrong. So we'll do that, but you have that done outsourced and then send it to the manufacturer. The manufacturer is required to just produce the product, the formula, put it in the bottles, put it in the boxes if you have boxes, and then ship that retail ready directly to the store. Or you could have them ship it to you and then you ship to the stores. That's more expensive because you got to think about the shipping costs.
Yeah.
But
And
that's
warehousing, right?
in
Yeah.
the warehousing.
On
Yeah.
the warehousing. And hey, Desi, could you hit back on that custom packaging point again, real quick? Because I know some people might have heard you and not fully understood what you meant by custom packaging. I want to. That was a really good point. I want to make sure we double tap that, which is custom packaging for the audience is packaging that not is industry standard. So there are a ton of industry standard bottles and packages, the Boston package style and the cylindrical and all these different shapes. So you can find stock packaging with a wider range of options other than just one contract manufacturer. So to Desi's point, you can contract your bottles or your packaging, but I think one key point, Desi, I wanted you to comment on was it does matter that they keep you in the conversation on packaging specifically because in especially hair care and cosmetic applications, the way in which the product is delivered to the consumer also matters. And I can think of some examples of custom packaging that may or may not have been effective, like Taraji P. Henson's launch of her brand. She had this really innovative, really cool eye-catching packaging that was all, for the most part, custom. That custom packaging means it requires custom molds. So for people who don't understand that, those are molds that basically would belong to your packaging only that the manufacturer would have to make. These molds cost, in some cases, tens of thousands of dollars. So not only are you now buying a custom formulation, remember you're paying for the actual formula itself. Now you're also potentially going to be on the hook for every custom package that you designed to put that formulation in. You're going to have to pay the manufacturer to purchase the dye and the equipment they need to produce that packaging, which could be an additional added cost. So I love the fact that you brought that up because I get a lot of founders who work with really great creatives, but the creatives aren't connected to the reality of packaging. So they come back with these super dope designs, right? You're like, woohoo, look at this design I got, Mr. Ammons. This thing is nice, huh? And you look at it, you're like, whoa,
okay, wait a minute. Did you talk to the formulation side of things to see if this actually could disperse out of this bottle? And then in some cases we found, wow, you had a formula that was supposed to be aerosolized, and it can't be put in an aerosol package because the package you chose doesn't allow for aerosol. So talk a little bit about like just what functionality of packaging when it comes to formulation.
Yeah, functionality is very important. That's another time that you would tap somebody like Cataanda, because she's going to go through and actually use the product, and she's going to let you know, like, this is not functional. It's not enjoyable to, get the product out of this type of packaging.
Yeah.
But that's something that we consider throughout the formulation process as well. So as I'm sending samples, I'll send you in a pump bottle. I'll send you in a flip or whatever, just so we
a tub, a jar, whatever. Yeah.
All that kind of stuff. Consider what the formulation is. So if it's potentially like weak, not necessarily weak, but if it's susceptible to like bacterial kind of what do you call it? I'm sorry, I'm at a loss for words. But if it's susceptible to being harmed,
contaminated.
Then you don't want to use a jar.
Yeah.
You don't want to have dipping your hands in and out of. If it's going to be in the shower, you don't want
like cross contamination. You're saying like having cross contamination where you stick your hand in something else and stick it in the jar. Oh man, I might be doing that. I got a product actually with a jar. You just made me think I might cross contaminate. Okay, offline I got to change something up in my hair routine.
How you're using it. So if it's a product and you're going to use it, or your end customer is going to use it in the shower, then you don't want it in a jar because it's constantly open to contamination. And even the best preservative system may have a hard time if you're just super overloading it. And people are nasty; they'll leave the tops off.
Why are all the body scrubs in the jar things in?
To your point, I was about to
fill up with water.
Because
like several body scrubs because water got in them so
throw them away.
So thick that the only other option is to put them in a tube. Fine, but tubes are also more costly because you can't fill them the same way that you fill.
That is a good point.
So many different things you have to consider.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
That's a great point. So look, we could do another episode, I know, because this is actually the packaging piece is really intriguing. Heloise and Desi could do a separate episode there. So Des, we would love to have you come back from time to time as a contributor on the Brand Blueprints. We have so enjoyed all of the knowledge and science you dropped on this episode today. It's really, really been a great episode.
Thank you. I had a blast.
Well, look, before we get out of here, as always, I want to make sure that our listeners can definitely find you and get in touch with you and work with you after the show. So as we already said, we have a website, www.thebrandblueprint.biz, not .com, because we're about that biz. You can find Des's information on that website. After the show, we'll have her respective links, etc. But can you go on and drop those as well now? So those of you who want to immediately reach out and get in touch with you can do so.
Absolutely. Yes. You can find me on Instagram. I'm not really there much, but you can find me on Instagram at Glam_Scientist. Also, the name of my company is TGS Labs and Consultancy, and our website is tgsconsults.com. So you can find me there. Also on LinkedIn, I am Desiree Mattox. I'm recently married, but my maiden name is Mattox.
Congratulations. Yep. And I have already connected with her. So if you find me on LinkedIn, you can also connect with Desiree through me. As she says, she is the Glam Scientist. I don't want to miss that. TGS, if you heard it, TGS, the Glam Scientist. Check out her website. You can find some more information out about her out there as well. Don't forget, as well as we mentioned, Cataanda is also out there and available for product testing. So for those of you founders who may need to do, and I know there's a lot of you who do need to do some additional product testing, reach out to my girl. She's out there and available as well. Cataanda, drop your information again. So for those of you fumbling with their phones, they can hurry up and find that.
I am Cataanda J across the board. So Cataanda J on Instagram, Cataanda J on Twitter. I'm not there much. Cataanda J on TikTok. And on LinkedIn, I am Cataanda James. Cataanda is spelled Cataanda, J, as you see here in my little box picture box.
Okay, love that. And then lastly, I would be remiss if I didn't also recommend and remind founders that the wonderful Heloise Lanoix is also a Jedi Knight master of everything creative. And for those of you who are wondering why she was asking questions about labeling and packaging and design, is because that is her expertise. And so for those of you who are struggling to find a really good creative at a really, really good price, and when I say really good price, I don't mean cheap. I mean, you're going to get a lot for what you pay for. That is somebody you also need to put into your Rolodex. So again, we are so excited to really get this episode out to you. For those of you who are watching, make sure you go out on our social media platforms and on your various podcast platforms and follow us, like us. And if you don't like us, I tend to think you might be a hater. So don't be a hater. Like our content, share it with people who you know can benefit from it, especially other founders, especially this episode. I'm so excited to get this information out because Desi and Cataanda really dropped some knowledge on the show today. So again, thanks for joining us on the Brand Blueprint. We're excited to bring you a lot of content in the month of January. Again, we want to shout out and just say, remember today, hopefully by the time you watch this, you did something on MLK Day to signify his birthday. But remember, it's not a day off, it's a day on. So thanks again for joining the Brand Blueprint, and we'll see you the next time.
Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Brand Blueprint. I hope you gained valuable insights into the product development process and how you can avoid the common pitfalls that many indie brands face. Big thanks to all of our guests, but especially Desi, the Glam Scientist, for coming in and really helping us demystify this process for our audience. Now, make sure you go out, follow, like, comment, and share this episode with anyone you think that could benefit from this great advice. And be sure to follow the Brand Blueprint for more expert tips, lessons, and industry insights. Your next big idea could be just one episode away. Let's grow together. Thank you for joining us on another great episode of the Brand Blueprint, and we'll see you the next time.